Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mr. Bauer. Here's lesson 4.5. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. All right. 4.5 is on page 280. If you have your book, you may want to look at that with this. Today's lesson is on writing a function rule. Okay. Now, as I had said in the previous lesson, the rule is basically what your equation is. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit backwards just so you can kind of see how it works. But to turn a real-world problem into an equation does take some skill, okay? Now, I'm doing this backwards because I want you to see the equation first, and then we're going to do a problem and then convert the parts to the equation. So first, I want to identify the parts of the equation. So I made a random equation here. It's y equals 3x plus 10. Now, as you're well aware, this can, like from the last lesson, you can convert this into a graph. Like you give a value for x and then just continue on. So let's just take a look. Y represents the total, 3x represents the variable number, and plus 10 represents the fixed number. So I wrote some hints here on the side. Your fixed number is always added or subtracted in the equation. Okay? And what I mean by that is, and I say always, but it 99% of the time, I'll put it that way. But the number that is fixed in an equation, basically it's going to be like a flat amount, it's not going to change, is usually added or subtracted in your total. But your variable number is always multiplied or divided, okay? So the variable number, the one that changes, is always going to be multiplied or to something or divided by something, okay? And your total is always going to be isolated, okay? Now you'll notice that y is isolated. When I say isolated, remember we mean by itself. And by itself means that other than the equal sign, there's nothing on that side of the equation. Okay, so let's take a look. I have a word problem here I created. The cost to go mini golfing with a group is $3 per person in the group. There is a flat fee of $10 per group for golf club rentals. How much would it be for a group of 5, a group of 10, and a group of 12 kids to go cost? How much is that going to cost? Now, first what I want to do is I want to identify the parts, okay? Now, I'm going to start with y here, the total, okay? So which words kind of represents the total? And that, oops, there's my lid. That would be the cost, okay? Now, since that's cost, I'm going to go ahead and call it C. Now remember, the total is always isolated, okay? So, since I know that this represents my total, then I'm going to isolate it and put it by itself. Now, let's take a look if we can find the fixed number. Fixed number is always added or subtracted to the total, okay? So the fixed number, the cost to go mini golfing with a group of $3 per person, and a flat fee of $10 per group. These words, flat fee, implies that this is just a fixed value. It's not going to change. It's not going to be like, all right, it's not going to be like, okay, it's $10 today, but if you have more than this many people go, then it's going to be $12. It's always going to be $10. So the flat fee here would be the $10. Okay. Now I'm going to go over here and aligning it with the same equation that I put up there. I'm going to go ahead and put plus 10. So when you read the word problem, you have to go through and identify the parts. But I wanted you to know how they fit into the equation first. That's why I wrote the equation first. So then the next part would be the variable number, okay? So the variable number, usually when you see words like per, that indicates times. So the coefficient of the variable number is the cost per person, okay? What's the variable number itself? Well, it's a variable, so it changes. And if you look, it's a group of 5, a group of 10, and a group of 12. But the variable itself is the word person, okay? Now, so I'm going to use the variable p for person. And how much is it per person? It is $3 per person. Okay, Evelyn, that's right. I'm glad you answered it. So, I'm going to go ahead and color this green. Now, as you can see, we have created a variable rule here. Actually, we created an equation that's in the same form as the equation here. Y is equal to 3x plus 10. We changed to c is equal to 3p plus 10. And we found the items within within the what's it called? Within the word problem. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put this information into a table. Okay. Now, in a typical table, we call our values x and y. Now remember the original equation we wrote. We have x here and we have y here. Okay. But in the new equation we made, we changed them to c, meaning cost, and p, meaning people. So which one is x? That's correct, Isai. X is p for people. And which one is y? Y is going to be c for cost. Okay. Sorry, just got a text. I'm going to color code this just so it kind of stays consistent here. Okay. Again, it's all about being able to identify the parts. Now, looking back at my word problem here, I have 3 values, meaning the number of people that would go golfing. So I have 5 people, so P equals 5. I have 10 people, and I have 12 people. I have an extra spot here, which I don't necessarily need, but I can use if I'm asked a second question, like, well, what if 20 people went? You know, that type of a thing. Okay. Now, the cost is $3 per person plus a flat fee of $10 per group. Okay. So I can rewrite this as C is equal to 3 times, and in this case, it'll be 5 people plus 10. So 3 times 5 is what? And let's see, who's got their hand raised? Aaliyah, that's right. 3 times 5 is 15, okay? And what is 15 plus 10? Yes, Hector, you're right. 15 plus 10 is 25. So if there's 5 people, the cost is $25. Let's go ahead and do this again. cost is equal to $3 times 10 people plus $10. 3 times 10 is 30. 30 plus 10 is 40. Now you'll notice even though we have double the number of people, it's not specifically double the cost. Now, you might have looked at this and figured it out, but since you have a flat fee of $10, then it actually was more cost effective to bring a bigger group. Because if you're bringing a bigger group, you're still going to pay $10 even if you just bring a group of 2. Now let's try 12. So C is equal to $3 times 12 people for the entrance fees plus 10. 3 times 12 is 12, 24, 36. Okay, 36 plus 10 is 46. Okay, so that is kind of how you do it. So if I were to put in the steps, the first step I would say would be to kind of memorize the parts of the equation. Okay, now I can write a numberless equation. Y is equal to mx plus b. Now this just means the same things. I'd like you to memorize it in this form because m and b have a special meaning that you don't need to know now, but you will need to know in a later lesson. So if you memorize it in this form, then that will be the form that you always want to put your function rule in. Okay. The second thing is to go through and identify the parts, okay, within the word problem. Now again, looking at the word problem, let me just go here so you can see. There's 3 different types of numbers. Now I color-coded them. You don't have to, but you can if you want. There's the fixed number, which is always added or subtracted. There's the variable number, which usually has a number in front of it, but it's being multiplied or divided. Even if there's no number in front of it, like it's just x, then that still means 1 times x, so it's always being multiplied. And then your total is always isolated, okay? Added or subtracted, multiplied, divided, or like with an invisible 1 in front of it for the variable, and the total is always isolated. So then you want to read your problem, find the fixed number, the variable number, and the total. Now in this, I color-coded it. The total is usually pretty easy to find because that usually comes last. Like how much is it going to cost? How many parts can fit into the box? Whatever the question is asking, okay? So the variable part is always, the total is usually the easiest to find, okay? And then you want to put it in the form. In this case, and in most cases, the total is going to be the number that's represented with y. Now, you can use x and y instead of these letters from the word problem, but sometimes it's good to try to use the letters from the word problem and substitute them for the letters x and y so that you can see how it fits, okay? Now, the second easiest thing to find is the fixed number. Usually there's going to be words like flat fee or like per this much per total, something like that, you know. But the idea is that number is always added, or if it's a minus, then it's always subtracted, okay? So the idea is the number that would be plus or minus always, you know, goes over there to the right. The hardest one to find is the variable one. And you usually see some wording like per person or per something. And not all word problems are going to have suggested values for the variable. Like in this one, it says a group of 5, a group of 10, and a group of 12. So it literally gave you 5, 10, and 12. It gave you 3 x values, or, you know, number of people. So it would be p values. Regardless, whether it gives you values or not, it's usually going to be the amount per or times whatever it is that your variable is going to be. So that might be a way. we figured it out because we said per person, $3 per person, so that made it very clear. The word per made it very clear that multiplication was going to be happening. Okay? Then when you set it up, your total, your overall cost is going to be your y value, and then whatever your variable is going to be your x value. Okay? And then just substitute in what numbers you have. If you don't have any numbers for the x value to substitute in, then depending on what the problem is asking, it may say just set up the problem so I know it. So in that case, C equals 3p plus 10 would be your answer. But if it does say, okay, give me some values, then you can maybe estimate. What if 5 people went? What if 10 people went? What if 12 people went? And then you can put some values in, okay? Now, in the case of a one where it doesn't give you any values, but it wants you to ask, you may have to use, like I said in previous lessons, the convenient values. However, keep in mind, there's not going to be a negative cost to this, so you may refrain from like negative numbers. 0 would be okay because let's say if I put 0 in here. So what would the cost be if 0 people went? Okay, so C equals 3 times 0 plus 10. 3 times 0 is 0, and then plus 10, well, it would be 10. But that's kind of ridiculous because if 0 people went, why would you be renting clubs for 10 bucks? So really, in that case, the cost would be actually be 0 because you really wouldn't be adding the 10. Okay. So here I just found a loophole in my equation, but regardless, I mean, with common sense, you can figure, oh, well, I can do this mathematically and say it would be $10, but you and I both know if nobody goes, then you're not going to be paying the money. Okay? So hope that makes it clear. Please look at the lesson carefully. It gives you a couple of different examples you can go through before starting your homework. Thank you much. Have a great day.